The marble floors of Continental Bank gleamed like ice under the afternoon sun. 12-year-old Devin Carter stood just inside the glass doors, his small fingers gripping a wrinkled deposit slip that had lived in his pocket for 3 days. He'd been too nervous to come sooner. His sneakers were held together with silver duct tape that caught the light every time he shifted his weight. His jeans had patches sewn along the knees, careful stitches his grandmother had made while humming old hymns at her sewing table. Devin had saved every single dollar for 2 years, every lawn he mowed in the blazing summer heat, every driveway he shoveled when snow fell so thick he could barely see, every penny he found, every birthday dollar from distant aunts. Today, he just wanted to know the number. He wanted to see if all that work meant something. The bank was crowded with the lunch rush. Men and women in sharp suits moved past him like he was invisible. Their shoes clicked importantly across the floor. Their watches glinted. Their voices carried the confidence of people who belonged. Devin felt small standing there, but he remembered what his grandmother always said while frying chicken on Sunday mornings. "Baby, money doesn't care what you're wearing. It only cares about the work you put in to earn it." He took a breath and walked toward the nearest desk. A man in his late 40s sat there, his tie perfectly knotted, his shirt so white it almost hurt to look at. The nameplate read Richard Brennan, branch manager. Richard glanced up from his computer screen, and Devin watched his eyes travel slowly from the taped sneakers to the patched jeans to the faded jacket. A smile crossed Richard's face, but it wasn't kind. It was the smile of someone who'd already decided what he was looking at. "Can I help you, son?" Richard asked, though his tone said he'd really rather not. Devin straightened his shoulders the way his grandfather had taught him before he passed. "Stand tall," his grandfather used to say. "Let your spine do the talking when your voice feels small." "Yes, sir," Devin said clearly. "I'd like to check my account balance, please." Part 2. The sound of mockery. Richard Brennan leaned back in his leather chair, the kind that swiveled and reclined like a throne. He crossed his arms over his chest and let out a small laugh through his nose. "Your account," he repeated, as if Devin had just told a joke. He glanced over his shoulder toward the tellers behind him. "Brett, you hearing this?" A younger man, maybe in his late 20s with slick-back hair and a cheap tie, looked up from his station. Brett grinned. "What's up, boss?" "Young man here says he's got an account," Richard said, louder now. Loud enough that a few customers waiting in line turned their heads. "Says he wants to check his balance." Brett actually laughed out loud. A couple of people smiled. One woman in a business suit glanced at Devin and then quickly looked away, embarrassed for him. Devin felt heat crawl up his neck and settle in his cheeks. His fingers tightened around the deposit slip until the paper crumpled even more. But he didn't move. He didn't run. His grandmother had also taught him this. When people try to make you small, baby, you stand even taller. "Yes, sir," Devin said again, his voice quieter now but steady. "My savings account. I've been putting money in for 2 years." Richard's grin widened. He tilted his head like he was talking to a toddler. "Let me guess, son. You've got what, $5 in there? Maybe 10 if you've been real good." He looked back at Brett. "What do you think, Brett? Over/under on $10? Brett laughed again, shaking his head. "I'll take the under, boss." But not everyone was laughing. Behind the counter, standing near the vault door, was a woman in her early 60s with silver streaks in her neatly braided hair. Patricia Morrison had worked at Continental Bank for 37 years. She'd seen managers come and go. She'd seen Richard Brennan climb the ranks on charm and family connections, not on character. And right now, she did not like what she was seeing. Patricia set down the files she was holding and crossed her arms. Her eyes locked on Richard's back, hard as stone. Devin reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out the slip of paper. "The account number's right here, sir," he said softly, holding it out. Richard sighed dramatically, like Devin was wasting precious time. He snatched the paper from the boy's hand and turned back to his computer. His fingers moved slowly over the keyboard, dragging out each keystroke like he was doing Devin some grand favor. Then his face changed. Part 3. When the smirk disappeared, Richard's fingers froze over the keyboard. His eyes narrowed at the screen. He leaned forward, squinting like the monitor had just shown him something impossible. Then he hit a few more keys, faster this time, as if the computer had made a mistake and he needed to double-check. Brett noticed the shift. His laughter died in his throat. "Boss," he said. "Everything good?" Richard didn't answer. His face had gone pale, the color draining from his cheeks like water from a cracked bowl. He stared at the screen, then looked at Devin, then back at the screen, his mouth opening and closing without sound. "There must be some mistake," Richard muttered under his breath. Devin's heart dropped into his stomach. His hands started to tremble. All that work. All those mornings waking up at dawn to catch the early lawn jobs. All those nights his fingers ached from gripping the shovel. Had something gone wrong? Had someone stolen from him? "Did I do something wrong, sir?" Devin asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Is my money not there?" Patricia had seen enough. She walked over from behind the counter, her heels clicking sharply against the marble. She was done watching this boy be humiliated. "What's the problem, Richard?" she asked, her tone firm. Richard looked up at her, his face still drained of color. His voice came out thin and strained. "This account," he said slowly, "shows a balance of $47,312. The lobby went silent, not a sound. Not a cough, not a shuffle of feet. You could have heard a feather hit the floor. Patricia's eyebrows rose. She looked at Devin, really looked at him this time, seeing past the taped shoes and patched jeans. "May I see?" she asked. Richard turned the monitor toward her, his hands shaking slightly. Patricia leaned in and studied the screen. Her eyes moved over the numbers, the dates, the transaction history. What she saw made her throat tighten. Dozens of small deposits. $10 here, 20 there. Sometimes just 5. But they were steady week after week, month after month for nearly 2 years. And then she saw something else. Each deposit had grown. The account had been set up as a high-yield education savings program. Every single dollar Devin had earned had been working for him, multiplying slowly but surely, like seeds planted in good soil. Patricia straightened up and looked down at the boy in front of her. She saw him differently now, not as someone small, but as someone with more discipline and vision than most adults she knew. She knelt down slowly, her knees cracking a little until she was at Devin's eye level. "How did you do this, sweetheart?" she asked gently. Devin's voice was soft, but it didn't waver. "My grandfather helped me set it up before he passed," he said. "He told me if I worked hard and saved smart, the money would grow." Devin's eyes shimmered, but he didn't cry. "He said education was the one thing nobody could ever take from you." Part 4. When strangers became angels, Patricia felt tears prick the corners of her eyes. She'd been working in this bank for most of her adult life. She'd seen people with millions who treated tellers like furniture. She'd seen people with nothing who said thank you like it was a prayer. But she had never seen a child with this kind of discipline, this kind of vision. She thought of her own grandson, who spent more on video games in a month than this boy had probably spent on himself in 2 years. "Your grandfather," Patricia said, her voice thick, "was a very wise man." Richard had recovered just enough to try to salvage his dignity. He cleared his throat and straightened his tie. "Well," he said, forcing a smile that didn't reach his eyes, "this is certainly unexpected, Devin. I apologize for my, initial reaction. That was inappropriate." But Devin wasn't looking at Richard anymore. He was looking at Patricia, whose kind eyes reminded him of his grandmother. The way she looked at him made him feel like he mattered. "Will I have enough for college?" he asked quietly. Patricia smiled, a real smile that crinkled the corners of her eyes. "Sweetheart, if you keep going like this, you'll have enough for college and then some." A voice spoke up from the line of waiting customers. "Excuse me." It was a woman in her 60s wearing a simple floral dress and sensible shoes. She stepped forward, her purse clutched in both hands. "I'd like to make a deposit into this young man's account. How do I do that?" Richard opened his mouth to say something, but Patricia cut him off with a look that could have stopped traffic. "I can set that up," Patricia said firmly. Anyone who wants to contribute to Devon's education fund can do so. And then something extraordinary happened. People started lining up, not to do their own banking, but to give to a boy they'd never met. A businessman in an expensive suit and Italian leather shoes pulled out his wallet and handed Patricia 5 crisp $100 bills. "For the kid's future," he said simply. An elderly man leaning on a walker shuffled forward and pressed $50 into Patricia's hand. "I didn't finish school," he said, his voice gravelly. "But this boy will." Even Brett, the young teller who had laughed just minutes before, walked over sheepishly. He pulled a 20 from his wallet and placed it on the desk. He couldn't meet Devon's eyes. "I'm sorry," he muttered. Devon stood there, overwhelmed. He'd only wanted to check his balance. He hadn't expected this. He hadn't expected strangers to care. Patricia stayed by his side the whole time, one hand resting gently on his shoulder. When the crowd finally began to thin, Richard had disappeared. Patricia later heard through the office grapevine that he'd quietly requested a transfer to another branch across town. Some lessons, she thought, come harder than others. Part 5. The boy who kept going when the last person had made their donation. Patricia walked Devon to the front door. The sun was lower now, casting long shadows across the marble floor. Outside, the city hummed with traffic and voices and life continuing on like nothing had changed. But for Devon, everything had changed. "You did something remarkable today," Patricia said, stopping just before the doors. She knelt down again so she could look him in the eye, "not just by saving your money, but by showing all of us what real wealth looks like." Devon tilted his head. "What do you mean?" Patricia smiled. "It's not about the shoes you wear or the car you drive or the size of your house. Real wealth is about character. It's about discipline. It's about having a goal bigger than yourself." She paused, her voice softening. "That's something your grandfather taught you, and today you taught all of us." Devon's eyes grew glassy, but he blinked the tears back. "That's what my grandfather used to say," he whispered. "I miss him." "I know you do, honey," Patricia said, her own voice catching. "But he's still teaching you, and he always will be." Devon nodded and wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. Then he straightened his shoulders again, just like his grandfather had shown him. "Thank you, Miss Patricia," he said, "for being kind." "You're welcome, sweetheart. You come back here anytime you need anything, you hear me?" "Yes, ma'am." Devon pushed through the glass doors and stepped out into the afternoon sunlight. His shoes were still held together with duct tape. His jeans still had patches, but his head was held high. Patricia stood at the window and watched him walk down the sidewalk until he turned the corner and disappeared. She pressed her hand to the glass and thought about her own life. She'd worked at Continental Bank for decades. She'd seen countless people with money, but very few with Devon's kind of wealth. The story didn't end there. Word spread through the community like wildfire. Someone posted about it online. Local news picked it up. A reporter came to interview Devon and his grandmother at their small house on the east side of town. The footage showed their modest living room with the worn couch and the pictures of Jesus and Martin Luther King Jr. on the walls. It showed Devon's grandmother crying as she talked about her late husband and the lessons he'd left behind. Within a week, a formal scholarship fund had been established in his grandfather's name. Donations poured in from across the state. Devon's story became a symbol, a reminder that dignity and hard work still mattered in a world that often felt cold and unfair. Part 6. The ripple effect. Richard Brennan left Continental Bank 3 months later. No one was surprised. The incident had been reported to corporate, and while no official action was taken, Richard understood the writing on the wall. His reputation had been damaged. Customers had complained. Some had even closed their accounts in protest. He eventually left banking altogether and took a sales job in another city. People who knew him said he was quieter now, less quick to judge. Brett, the young teller who had laughed that day, couldn't shake the memory. It haunted him. He kept seeing Devon's face, the way the boy had stood there with quiet dignity while grown men mocked him. Brett started volunteering with a youth financial literacy program at the local community center. He taught kids about savings accounts and compound interest and the power of patience. He said he never wanted to judge someone by their appearance again. He said he owed that lesson to a 12-year-old boy in taped-up shoes. Patricia Morrison became something of a local hero herself. The bank promoted her to branch manager within 6 months. She used her new position to create outreach programs for underserved neighborhoods, offering free financial education workshops and no-fee youth savings accounts. She said she was just doing what should have been done all along. And Devin, he kept mowing lawns, he kept shoveling snow, he kept making his small, steady deposits every single week. He didn't change. He didn't spend the donated money on new shoes or fancy clothes. He stayed focused. His grandmother made sure of that. She'd raised him right, raised him to understand that character wasn't built in moments of ease, but in moments of discipline. He finished middle school at the top of his class. In high school, he joined the business club and the debate team. Teachers said he had a maturity beyond his years, a groundedness that was rare. He still lived in the same small house with his grandmother. He still wore clothes from thrift stores. But he walked through the halls with his head high, and people respected him for it. When college acceptance letters started arriving, Devin had his pick of schools. He chose State University, a solid public school with a strong business program. He didn't want to go somewhere flashy. He wanted to go somewhere real, somewhere that valued substance over status. His grandmother cried when he opened the acceptance letter. She held it in her trembling hands and looked up at the ceiling. "You see this, Richard," she said to her late husband. "You see what your boy did." Devin hugged her tight. "We did it, Grandma," he whispered. "We did it together." Part 7. The return 8 years later, Devin Carter graduated from State University with a degree in business and a minor in economics. He finished with honors. He'd worked part-time throughout college, still mowing lawns in the summer, still tutoring younger students for extra money. He never forgot where he came from. He never forgot the value of a dollar earned through honest work. On graduation day, Devin did something he'd been planning for months. He put on his cap and gown, the blue fabric crisp and new, the tassel hanging just right. He pinned his honors cords around his neck. And then he drove to Continental Bank. The building looked the same. The marble floors still gleamed. The tall windows still let in rivers of afternoon light. But when Devin walked through those glass doors, he wasn't a scared 12-year-old anymore. He was a man who had honored his grandfather's legacy. Patricia Morrison was standing near the teller counter, reviewing some paperwork. She'd aged a little, her hair more silver than before, but her eyes were still sharp and kind. When she looked up and saw Devin standing there in his graduation regalia, her face broke into the widest smile. "Devin," she gasped, dropping the papers. She rushed over and wrapped him in a hug so tight it nearly knocked his cap off. "Look at you, oh, look at you." Devin hugged her back, this woman who had shown him kindness when he needed it most. "I wanted you to see," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I wanted you to know I made it." Patricia pulled back and held him at arm's length, tears streaming down her face. "I never doubted you for a second, sweetheart. Not for 1 second." They stood there in the middle of the bank, two people connected by a moment years ago that had changed both of their lives. Other customers stopped and stared, some of them recognizing Devin from the news stories that had circulated. A few people started clapping. Then more joined in. Soon the entire lobby was applauding, the sound echoing off the marble and glass. Devin felt his own tears come then. He'd held so much inside for so long. The late nights studying, the pressure to succeed, the weight of carrying his grandfather's dream. But here, in this place where he'd once been humiliated, he felt nothing but love. Patricia walked him to her office, the same office that used to belong to Richard Brennan. She'd redecorated it with photos of her family and inspirational quotes on the walls. She poured them both coffee and they sat and talked for over an hour. Devin told her about his classes, his internships, his plans to start his own financial consulting business to help families like his build wealth. "Your grandfather would be so proud," Patricia said, shaking her head in wonder. "I hope so," Devin said softly. "I hope he knows." "Oh, he knows, baby, trust me, he knows." Part 8. What wealth really means. Before Devin left that day, Patricia handed him an envelope. "What's this?" he asked. "Open it later," she said with a mysterious smile. Devin tucked it into his jacket and hugged her one more time. As he walked back through the lobby, he noticed the employees watching him. Some of them were new, hired long after his story had made headlines. But they'd heard the tale. It had become part of the bank's culture, a reminder of what they stood for. Brett was still there, now an assistant manager himself. He walked over and extended his hand. "Congratulations, Devin," he said sincerely. "You earned every bit of it." Devin shook his hand. "Thank you," he said, "for everything you do at the community center. I've heard about your work." Brett smiled, a little embarrassed. "Just trying to make up for being a fool." "We all learn," Devin said. "That's what matters." When Devin got back to his car, he opened Patricia's envelope. Inside was a check for $5,000 and a handwritten note. "For your business. Every entrepreneur needs seed money. Invest it wisely, just like your grandfather taught you. With love, Patricia." Devin sat in his car and cried. Not sad tears, grateful tears. Tears for all the kindness he'd been shown. Tears for his grandfather who had planted seeds he'd never lived to see fully bloom. Tears for his grandmother who had sacrificed so much to raise him right. He drove home and showed his grandmother the diploma, the check, the note. She held them all in her weathered hands and smiled through her own tears. "Baby," she said, "you just remember something. This success you got, it's not just yours. It belongs to every person who believed in you. It belongs to your grandfather's memory, and it belongs to every young person out there who needs to see that hard work and good character still matter." "I won't forget, Grandma," Devin promised. "I'll never forget." And he didn't. Devin went on to build a successful financial consulting business. He worked primarily with low-income families, teaching them the same principles his grandfather had taught him. He spoke at schools and community centers. He funded scholarships. He went back to Continental Bank every year on the anniversary of that day, just to remember where he'd come from. The story of the boy with taped-up shoes became a legend in that city. Parents told it to their children. Teachers used it in their lessons. And whenever someone was tempted to judge another person by their appearance, someone else would say, "Remember Devin Carter." Because sometimes the most important transactions in a bank have nothing to do with money at all. They have everything to do with seeing people for who they really are, with giving everyone the respect and dignity they deserve, no matter what their shoes look like. And in the end, that's the kind of wealth that changes the world. The end.